Welcome back to Arise Prime Time. I'm Charles Anyegolu, and this is the part of the program where we dig a bit deeper behind the headlines with our guest analyst who will help us explore the stories and issues of the day. And today we have the current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Great to see you again, Prof.
Thank you, Charles.
And let's start with Charlie Boy. Beyond the political rhetoric, which we're used to hearing from him, very revealing interview when it comes to his personal health.
Yeah, revealing indeed. And of course, it's also very instructive and helpful for men mostly, especially when it comes to prostate health. Recently too, I've had the story of Professor Wole Soyinka surviving prostate cancer. I've also had the story of Pat Utomi, a professor surviving it as well, and now Charlie Boy. So it's always very good, very interesting that these public figures, have the courage to come to the open and share their experiences with all others, with the rest of us, so that we can probably be guided. And again, maybe be hopeful that if it comes, because of course medics will say that if you're male and you live long enough, it's something that you'll encounter. It can be very chilling, very emotional, but coming from Charlie Boy, of course, there are some other interesting dimensions to it. There are some areas he was delving into, and I was getting scared.
It's a bit risque, wasn't it?
If those areas are actually good for live television, But this is Charlie Boy. We know who he is.
I think I was told by the producer, Lakon, that the sound guy's finger was hovering over the button to know whether to push it and cut it off.
But I think the audience too, they will appreciate that it's Charlie Boy. He's who he is. He's a maverick. He has made his mark even at his age. He's a social reformer, largely. A change agent.
Person,
yes,
really.
and. He has paid his dues, and it's also great to know that he's still paying it. You may disagree with his style, but of course you cannot deny his impact. In terms of his contribution to the need or the move for us to have a better country.
Absolutely. No, he is. He's certainly one of the people who are up there when it comes to that. And he also talked about, from a philosophical perspective, a little bit about how all this makes you much more of a contemplative. Yeah. Because then you suddenly realize that you're a mortal. You're not immortal.
It just sort of combined to remind us of how feeble, how
absolutely
weak,
precarious,
how powerless we are
Yeah.
before God the Creator, and of course before any kind of health condition. And sometimes when medics tell you about cancer, possibly when they tell you that there are over 60 kinds of cancer that you can find in your body, you begin to wonder. Then you're probably just surviving with the grace of God, because you do not know when any of this could come. You do not know what can even cause it, And sometimes they also warn you to do this, not to do this, not to do that, or something like that, those kind of health counseling. And you begin to wonder sometimes, what else will I do, or what else will I not do? So at the end of the day, you just believe in what maybe Aristotle told us ages ago, that your belief should just be in the hands of the uncaused causer, and who is that uncaused causer? God Almighty, who is just there watching over us, and who we should, in our privacy, resort to in times of challenges, challenges that are far beyond you, beyond us. And one of these major challenges is actually health challenge, But overall, we just continue to try as humans, and when it's time for him to say, okay, come, join me, I created you, you have no option but to oblige him.
It's really an extraordinary metaphysical experience, isn't it? I mean, that we sit there and, in the prime of your youth, you don't even consider those things at all. You think of yourself as almost immortal. And then suddenly you wake up one day, you hit a certain age, and then you realize that you are
a certain age. And sometimes they will tell you that once you're above 50, above 40, you should begin to watch certain things, do your test maybe every 6 months, maybe and above 50, do your test every 3 months. And as it's increasing, you know, it means that you should be frequent with your tests. You know, the danger is not doing tests at all, but I think it can be slightly helpful if you are frequent with tests, so that if there's anything coming up, medics can quickly help you to nip them in the bud. Or
and it really is amazing how the body just simply starts to deteriorate. I mean, I remember a relative of mine who is perhaps considerably older than me, who said to me that I said, you look really good. I mean, you know, because if you see, I mean, you'd think he was in his late 30s or 40s or whatever. He said, look, let me tell you this. It's not the way that I look, it's the way that I feel inside.
There's so many
I
things
can feel my age inside.
That's right. There are so many things to eat, Charles. You see some people, they look 80, or maybe they are probably 80 and they are looking 70. Some look, they are 70, they are looking 60. Sometimes they also tell us that it's a matter of genetics, or sometimes it's a matter of a lifestyle. You know, I do know that lifestyle matter.
Yeah, it does.
And again, it could also be about economics. You know, how well are you able to take care of yourself? You know, sometimes people just resign, you know, when poverty is battering, you know, where poverty is there battering them. They just resign and they look haggard, you know. So at age 60, they're probably looking 80. It could be a result of poverty, or some kind of ailment that they probably cannot treat. So overall, it might be difficult to place hands on these things, but again, that's why we have specialists. That's why we have medics, you know, who can rightly advise us. And in advising us too, they're also concerned about us sticking to their advice. You know, but one problem they often have is that people are not listening to them. You know, they advise, you know, they prescribe, they give you drugs, they make their prescription, and people just simply decide to ignore it. You know, believing in, you know, being stoic, believing in what will be. You know, something has to kill a man. You know, those kind of fatal, dangerous.
Well, we don't want anything to kill us at all.
You know, well, all mortals, all living things will have to die.
What's the idea behind that? Well, that's a story for another day.
That's right.
But I mean, we had Professor Nicholas Westcott as well, whose analysis is always brilliant. He really has extraordinary knowledge of sort of geopolitics as it relates to Africa and all the rest of it. And he was talking about, you know, this meeting between Kim Jong-un of North Korea and Vladimir Putin, and the fact that the Russian state machine, perhaps through the Wagner mercenary group, has been increasing its presence in Africa. And you have to wonder why all these African countries are turning to Wagner.
Well, so many things. You know, it's Africa is particularly turbulent. You know, our institutions are weak. You know, governments are weak. You know, our system is really unpredictable. You know. There's no sustainability of anything. No sector is particularly sustainable. You know, you can count on your fingers states that are maybe permanent, that are witnessing permanent governance. You know, where there's sustainability. Only very few. So we are largely vulnerable to Western powers that are stronger than us. You know, in terms of wealth, in terms of the ability to help us, and oftentimes we find us being obliged to them. And you also find some of these powers continually looking for spheres of influence in Africa. And that's why you see the West, you know, yes, they have hold on many African countries, but oftentimes you also have countries in the East, Russia, for instance, trying to also make inroads, you know. And if Russia too, because of the situation that is in now, is particularly hemmed in on account of their invasion of Ukraine. If Russia is looking for new friends, you know, yes, we know North Korea is not too, they haven't been really enemies, but if they are trying to increase their level of relationship, it's not surprising, because Putin, it's somebody who should be looking for new darlings now, because he's practically hemmed in.
He's become a rogue state.
You don't know what
I don't think they
remember,
ever thought
I think it was
be.
Bush that once classed Russia, North Korea and Iraq as axis of evil. That's Western conception, United States conception. To some extent, there's still a sense in which you could say that those countries, you know, are still dangerous. Dangerous not because they are not friendly, not because they are not going to aid us, but because, you know, they are authoritarian. You know, they do not like freedom. You know, they are dictators. And of course, we're in the 21st century where freedom is priceless. And any nation that abhors freedom for citizens is not a nation that should be considered an ideal nation.
On that note, Prof, thank you very much indeed. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Bayes University in Abuja. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, Lagos and London, bye-bye and thank you for watching.